Sometime in the dry season of 2022, in a forested strip of the Colombian Amazon, a motion-sensing camera bolted to a tree trunk blinked to life. What it captured was not immediately dramatic. A small shape moved through the understory in the dark. The image was grainy, the animal was low to the ground, but when the biologists in Bogota opened the file and processed the image, they stopped. They were looking at a greater grison. It was a mustelid about 40 centimetres long with a silver-grey back, a black underside and a pale stripe running across the forehead like a mask, related to weasels and otters. Not a species anyone puts on a fundraising poster. But to an ecologist, the greater grison is a precision instrument. It requires dense forest cover, stable prey and connected habitat to survive. It cannot persist in fragmented landscapes. It does not colonise disturbed ground. Its presence in a territory is a biological vote of confidence in that territory. And the greater grison had never been recorded in this part of Colombia's Guaviare department. Not once. Not in any camera trap survey, not in any forest inventory, not in any ecological assessment stretching back across decades of scientific fieldwork. Nobody had connected it to this corridor, nobody had predicted it would appear. It simply walked through the frame, one dry season night, in a forest that had been contested, cleared and fought over for decades, as if it had always lived there. Which meant the corridor was doing something the models had not fully anticipated. This is the story of how a strip of forest in southern Colombia, carved out of one of the most violently contested landscapes in South America, was handed back to nature, and how nature responded faster and more completely than anyone had prepared for. To understand why this matters, you need to know what was lost. The Guaviare region of Colombia sits at one of the most extraordinary geographic crossroads on the planet. 4 of the continent's great biogeographical zones converge here in a single landscape. The Amazon rainforest presses in from the south and east. The Orinoco savannas sweep down from the north. The Andes Mountains shape the western horizon. From the southeast, the ancient Guyana Shield, a geological formation roughly 2 billion years old, pushes its sandstone columns upward from the canopy into flat-top mountains called tepuis. This is where Amazon, Andes, Orinoquia and Guyana collide. There is no other meeting point quite like it on Earth. The jaguar was the architect of this system for tens of thousands of years. Panthera onca, the largest cat in the Americas. By regulating prey populations across more than 80 species, the jaguar determined what ate what grew where, which rivers ran clear and which ran silted. Remove the jaguar and the cascade runs downward. Herbivores overpopulate, vegetation is stripped, soil erodes into waterways. Scientists call the result an empty forest. The trees may still stand, the rivers still run, but the system has lost the species that held it together from the top. The people who lived here understood this long before ecology had a name. The rock paintings at Chiribiquete, the massive sandstone plateau at the heart of the Guaviare region, depict jaguars more than almost any other figure. These paintings were made over a period of 20,000 years. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, formally named the park Chiribiquete National Park, the Maloca of the jaguar. In the indigenous languages of this region, a maloca is a cosmic meeting place, the home where the spirit of the forest resides. The people who painted these walls did not need a conservation strategy. They already understood what the jaguar was. Then came the era of systematic loss. Globally, jaguars have lost more than 50% of their historic range, which once covered approximately 6.33 million square kilometers from the American Southwest to northern Argentina. In Colombia specifically, habitat fragmentation and loss have reduced the species' occupied distribution by 39% within the country, according to a 2023 study in PLOS-1. 5 isolated subpopulations now survive inside Colombia, separated by roads, cattle pastures, coca fields, and oil palm plantations. Each year the isolation deepens. Isolated populations accumulate inbreeding. Their genetic diversity narrows. Eventually, even a healthy-looking population can collapse. In Guaviare, the story of that shrinkage has a detail that almost nobody includes when they tell it. For more than 50 years, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, the FARC, controlled vast stretches of the Colombian Amazon through armed presence and territorial enforcement. Their control was coercive and violent, but one of the inadvertent effects of that presence was to keep colonizers, land speculators, and cattle ranchers out of the deep forest. Roads did not get built in FARC territory. Chainsaw crews did not venture where guerrillas set the rules. The forest held, not because it was protected by law, because it was dangerous. Then, in 2016, the FARC signed a peace agreement with the Colombian government. The world celebrated. Within months, deforestation in Guaviare accelerated to some of the highest rates in the Amazon. Associate Professor Jaime Góngora, a wildlife geneticist at the University of Sydney, who worked with ex-combatant communities after the peace deal, documented what happened. The agreement helped advance biodiversity documentation, but it unintentionally led to increased deforestation by more than 65% across the country and 150% in protected areas. Land values in some areas rose by as much as 300%. Cattle ranchers moved fast. Speculators cleared to claim ownership. Satellite data recorded nearly 267,000 deforestation alerts in a single week across just 3 Amazonian departments. Deforestation had accelerated. In 2022, more than 112,000 hectares were cleared in the arc of deforestation, the frontier zone cutting through Caqueta, Guaviare, and Meta. The jaguar's world was contracting faster than the conservation models had projected. The models were not encouraging. Joaquin Carrizosa coordinates the Northern Amazon Program for Worldwide Fund for Nature Colombia, known as WWF Colombia. He understood the mathematics, and he also understood the geography. Between the protected core of Chiribiquete National Park to the south, the Sierra de la Macarena Reserve to the west, and the Nucac Indigenous Reservation to the north, there was an unprotected gap. Approximately 75,000 hectares of forest and savanna connected these protected areas, but fell inside no formal protection regime. If that gap closed to wildlife movement, the jaguar populations of the Colombian Amazon would be cut off from genetic exchange with populations elsewhere. Small isolated populations accumulate in breeding. Even if the habitat appears intact, the population eventually collapses. The proposal was to formalize that gap as a community-monitored wildlife corridor, not a new national park requiring evictions and enforcement budgets. A wildlife passage maintained by the people already living in and around it, backed by camera trap data that communities owned. The partners were unexpected in every direction. WWF Colombia worked with the Corporation for the Sustainable Development of Northern and Eastern Amazon and with the United Nations Development Programme, drawing on funding through the World Bank's Amazon Sustainable Landscapes Programme, financed by the Global Environment Facility. And they worked with the communities closest to the forest, including former FARC combatants. Associate Professor Góngora had been working on exactly this problem since 2017 through his programme called Peace with Nature. A survey of more than 10,000 FARC ex-combatants conducted after the peace deal found that 84% expressed interest in terrestrial and river environmental restoration. These were people who had spent decades inside Colombia's most remote and biologically rich ecosystems. They knew the game trails. They knew where peccaries watered and where big cats moved between forest types. Góngora described what they carried in their heads as scientific data that no university could have generated in less than a generation of fieldwork. In 2021, the first wave of cameras went in. 55 cameras were distributed across the proposed corridor and its surrounding territory. The placements were determined by local monitors who knew the landscape at ground level. Creek crossings, ridgelines where cats moved between forest types, waterways where prey concentrated in the dry season. The researchers pushed through wet savanna grass with equipment cases, boots sinking into dark soil, positioning sensors at exactly the height a jaguar would cross the frame. Each camera was deployed on a 3-month cycle, then retrieved and processed. Images were uploaded to Wildlife Insights, a cloud-based artificial intelligence platform built by Conservation International, the Wildlife Conservation Society, and WWF to process camera trap data at scale. The platform identified species automatically, eliminated blank frames, and organised image libraries that a single biologist would have needed months to review by hand. Here is a detail that rarely makes it into the conversation. The XFARC combatants did not just assist, they led. In the community of Sabanas de la Fuga, former fighters named Julio Ambeda and Cesar Garcia helped install acoustic recording equipment to capture the sounds of the forest that no camera could document. A former combatant known as Freddy, now part of an ecological tourism cooperative called Manatu, conducted field tests to determine the optimal camera placement angles. These were men who had patrolled these forests under arms for years. Now they were in the same forests with GPS units and clipboards. The camera data was the property of the communities. Their logos appeared on every image produced. That was not symbolic. It meant the communities had real authority over how information was used, in negotiations with government agencies, in land use decisions, in conversations about the corridor's future. Gongora later said he had tears of happiness watching ex-combatants present their conservation plans to local police and army chiefs. These were people who, only a few years earlier, had been trying to kill each other. Now they were in the same room talking about jaguars. The early results were modest. Jaguars were confirmed in the first season, and prey species were appearing in the images. Nothing in that first year suggested what was coming. Scientists expected to document jaguars and a range of common Amazonian mammals. What they found was something the models had not prepared them for. By 2024, 5 annual monitoring seasons had been completed. More than 114 wildlife species had been documented inside the corridor, 57 species of mammals, 43 species of birds and reptiles, at least 12 species classified as regular jaguar prey. Jaguars appeared in every single monitoring season without exception. In the most recent season, jaguars appeared on 22% of active cameras. Let me put that in context. This corridor is surrounded on multiple sides by some of the highest deforestation rates in the Colombian Amazon. The forest beyond its edges is being converted to pasture at a pace researchers describe as among the fastest anywhere in the Amazon basin. And yet inside the corridor, the jaguar maintained stable occupancy across 4 consecutive years. The occupancy analysis confirmed it. The jaguar was not passing through, it was living there. 5 species of wild cats were documented simultaneously in the corridor. 5. The jaguar, the puma, the ocelot, the margai, and the jaguarundi. 5 feline predators occupying the same landscape at the same time in a territory that, by every external indicator, should be under severe ecological stress. And then came the grison. The greater grison is about 40 centimetres long, silver-grey on top and black beneath, with a distinctive pale stripe across its head. It is what ecologists call an indicator species. It does not live in degraded or fragmented landscapes. Its presence signals something about habitat integrity that population counts of bigger animals cannot provide as cleanly. And it had never been recorded in this part of Guaviare, not in any survey, museum collection or historical record of any kind. The project documentation was unambiguous. The greater grison was a species that had never been detected in the region before. It moved through a camera frame one night and gave the scientists their clearest signal yet. The system was rebuilding itself, not the way engineers rebuild things, but the way nature rebuilds things. Slowly, then suddenly. Here is the key insight that changed everything. A corridor does not just benefit the species it was designed for. The full species list included white-lipped peccaries, one of the most ecologically important prey species in the Amazon, and giant anteaters, classified as vulnerable by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Giant anteaters require undisturbed soil, intact termite and ant colony architecture, and specific ground cover conditions. They are absent from degraded landscapes. Their presence alongside the 5 cat species and the grison was not just impressive, it was a systems reading. The cascade was visible in the data. Jaguars present meant prey populations were regulated. Regulated prey meant vegetation pressure was controlled. Controlled vegetation meant stable soils. Stable soils meant the undisturbed microhabitats that allowed the giant anteater to persist. Each link depended on the one before it. Pull the jaguar out and the sequence collapses. Put the jaguar back and the sequence reassembles around it. That is not a coincidence, that is balance. This is not romantic nature worship, this is hard-nosed ecology with a dollar figure attached to it. The community monitoring program operates roughly 56 cameras per season, maintained by local monitors who are compensated for their labour and managed through a free cloud platform. It has generated species inventories matching or exceeding what government-funded programs with aerial surveillance contracts and multi-million-dollar annual budgets produce. In comparable Amazonian landscapes, a jaguar does not invoice anyone for regulating prey populations. A community monitor with a camera trap does not require the construction of a government surveillance infrastructure. The data refuse to fit the assumption that serious conservation requires serious institutional spending. The corridor is not winning. That sentence has to stand here inside all those results because it is true. Beyond the corridor's edges, the deforestation continues. More than 112,000 hectares were cleared in the arc of deforestation in 2022 alone. The monitoring program documents what lives inside the corridor. It cannot stop what happens outside it. It is worth naming the people on the other side of this story without dismissing them. A cattle rancher in the municipality of San Jose del Guaviare cleared forest this year to extend his pasture. He is not a villain. He has a bank loan that requires the land to produce, a market that pays for beef and does not yet pay for standing forest, and a family that needs to eat. He was not consulted when the corridor was drawn on a map, he nodded when told the jaguar was important, and he kept clearing because clearing is how the regional economy functions. The cattle economy in Guaviare is not a marginal phenomenon. Tens of thousands of families depend on it. Payment for ecosystem services programs that would compensate landowners for maintaining forest cover exist in concept. The evidence behind them is solid. The funding to scale them to Guaviare does not yet exist. Carrizosa of the World Wildlife Fund Colombia has said directly that only by meeting the economic needs of the communities closest to the forest can the landscape and the wildlife within it survive. The jaguar needs the corridor to persist. The communities that protect the corridor need an economy that makes protection viable. One without the other does not hold. The Manatu Ecotourism Cooperative, run by former FARC combatants, generates some of that return. The scale is still small, and the deforestation rates outside the corridor have not dropped. Go back to that camera frame. A motion sensor blinked, a silver and black shape moved through the dark. A species that science had never recorded in this territory stepped into the flash of the camera and confirmed something that a generation of ecologists had theorized but never measured at this scale. The corridor was not a gap between protected areas with a line drawn around it. It was a living system, and it was doing what living systems do when given the chance to function. It was filling in. The jaguar has been painted on the walls of these mountains for 20,000 years. The indigenous peoples who made those paintings were not sentimentalists. They were naming a structural truth. The jaguar is the axis around which this landscape turns. Give the jaguar a connected place to move, and the world it carries with it. The peccaries, the anteaters, the 5 wildcats on the hillside, the grison in the dark, fills in behind it. The system remembers what it is supposed to be. You just have to hold the door open long enough. Colombia held a door open in Guaviare. The animals noticed. What surprised you most in this story? Was it the 5 wildcat species sharing a corridor that external data said should be struggling? Was it the greater grison moving through a landscape where science said it did not exist? Was it the men who once patrolled these forests under arms, now setting camera angles and processing biodiversity inventories in the same trees? Leave it in the comments. This is the kind of story this channel was built around. Stories happening across the planet right now that almost nobody in mainstream conservation coverage is talking about. If you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. We cover stories about restoration and the people who are fixing what is broken. Hit subscribe. See you in the next one.